Okay, well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's Digital Dealer webinar. Today's webinar is sponsored by Adtaxi and it's titled The Great Shift to Streaming and How to Win on Connected TV. Today's webinar presenters are Matt Mendez, Director of Client Development from the Trade Desk, Brian Kroll, Vice President of Strategic Accounts, and Dan Maynard, Western Regional Director, Auto from Adtaxi. This webinar will run approximately 1 hour with a question and answer session at the end, and please utilize the Q&A feature on your toolbar to type in your question or comment. Now, please join me in welcoming our presenters, Matt, Brian, and Dan.
Well, thank you very much for that introduction. My name is Daniel Maynard, as you mentioned, and really excited to be here with everybody today. If you're not familiar with Adtaxi, we are an agency that's really founded in programmatic. We've been around since 2010, and I believe we'll have to check in with our co-presenter from the Trade Desk that we might have been if not one of the first agencies to actually partner with the Trade Desk. So we also have strong partnerships with other players in the space as well. But this is a webinar, quite frankly, I've been really looking forward to for years, ever since I joined this organization, and I'm really excited to get into some of the content. So with that, I'll ask Matt to give a brief description of the Trade Desk.
Hi, Dan, and thanks for that introduction. At the Trade Desk, if you're not familiar with our platform, the Trade Desk is the largest independent demand-side platform in the advertising ecosystem. And that word independent is really important because what that means is that we focus solely on the buy side of the media buying and programmatic ecosystem. So that allows our great partners like Adtaxi to focus exclusively on the advertiser and through a fully objective platform that's going to focus or allow Adtaxi to drive dollars towards the most valuable prospects that you have for your business and driving the campaign performance that's most important to you.
Very good. And with that, we'll pass it over to Mr. Brian Kroll, who is our Vice President of our West Coast sales unit.
Thanks, Dan. And yeah, welcome everybody. To Dan's point, I've been with Adtaxi since the beginning, and one of our very first, I think one of the very first campaigns on the Trade Desk was one of the campaigns that we ran. They've been a terrific partner of ours over the years, and we love the partnership that we've got going on with Trade Desk. I want to thank them again for doing this webinar with us today. Here's what we're going to kind of run through today from a programming perspective. So we want to talk a little bit about how the landscape has shifted, in particular in the last basically like almost a year to the date from today, which is a little funky. What happened with COVID and the great shift to streaming. We're going to spend some time talking about what connected TV is. I think that there can be sometimes a lot of confusion out there with what you want to call, acronym soup about connected TV, OTT, et cetera. So we'll dig into that and define what it really is. Then my favorite part is the power of the tech. What we can do with the bidding of Trade Desk platform to really drive and put that exact right message in front of that exact right person, exact right time on the biggest screen in the house. And then we'll close it out with, how do you think about all of this stuff holistically? What's an integrated strategy with your video campaigns to basically put video everywhere? So with that, without further ado, I will turn it over to Mr. Mendez.
Thanks, Brian. So I think we can all agree that the past 12 to 18 months has really represented the paradigm shift that we've been anticipating for quite some time in the mass acceleration and adoption of connected TV. So everyone's familiar with this phrase of cord cutting. We hear it all the time, right? So when you start thinking about that kind of migration away from paid TV into connected TV and really cutting the cord, prior to 2020, what we had seen was kind of the steady rate of cord cutting across the ecosystem that was around 3 to 5% on an annualized basis for cable subscribers. Well, in 2020, Not surprisingly, given the pandemic and more time spent at home, more time streaming, of course, that number skyrocketed to 15% in 2020. So that was a monumental moment. And Brian talked about really kind of the year anniversary of kind of some of these shutdowns, working from home. In talking to my partners on the connected TV inventory side, he remembers really March being a huge game-changing month for us, because from the inventory side of the content providers in connected TV, they were starting to see these immediate growth rates of increases of 30 to 40% of users of their different streaming platforms. So as we head into 2021, the surprising thing is that this trend is only continuing to accelerate. We did our own proprietary research heading into 2021, and we found that through our research, 27%, actually, if you can stay on that slide, Dan, 27% of households that currently have a cable subscription are planning to cut the cord within this year. So from an industry-wide, if you look at the slide from, on the right from eMarketer, we are waiting for this inflection point where connected TV is going to be at parity with linear television. And the way that this slide is looking at that, it's looking at pay TV households versus non-pay TV households. So they're looking at that inflection point being a couple years down the road. But that doesn't really tell the full story. The full story is when you look at available reach within connected TV. And that's on the next slide. So we not only reached the tipping point, we have accelerated beyond that tipping point, because marketers can now reach more connected TV households than traditional pay households. So similar to what you saw on the eMarketer slide or chart on the prior slide, the cable subscribers, pay TV households has dipped below 80 million. Looking just within our platform of who we have addressable reach towards in connected television, it is over 80 million households. And the reason for that is because linear households that still have cable satellite subscriptions, are also streaming connected TV content. I happen to be one of those households. And what it presents is, in many cases, obviously, is a true net new audience. So for larger scale advertisers, I focus exclusively on the automotive vertical at the trade desk. So I do a lot of work at the tier 1 and tier 2 levels. So obviously at that level, you can no longer pick or choose between linear TV or connected TV. You have to think of your television planning much more holistically, particularly if you need to target a younger consumer. Because if you look of people 18 to 34, through an analysis in our platform, 77% of that important, valuable audience, which represents a new crop of buyers for new and used vehicles, are only available through connected TV. So if that is part of your important targetable audience, they're no longer going to see your messages if you are solely relying on linear television. So it's providing a whole new net new opportunity, and larger brands have to really start thinking about, and even retailers as well, this balance between working not one or the other, but really balancing both your linear TV strategies and your connected TV strategies. One of the tools that we have brought to our platform that allow our partners like Adtaxi to actually execute these strategies is through what we call linear extension. This happens to be one example from an advertiser on our platform. And the way in which we do that is through our partnerships with ACR data providers. So ACR stands for Auto Content Recognition. You may be familiar with these segments. This is smart TV viewing data. So this is actually not panel-based TV data. This is actualized TV data that's provided through smart televisions that we all opt into to track our watching behavior when we set up our smart TVs, if we do in fact opt in, which most smart TV owners do. So what we're able to do through our platform, through those ACR partnerships, is know exactly those households that are viewing commercials from our advertising clients on linear. So now you can plan CTV as a way to get net new eyeballs and do what we call linear extension. Through this strategy, this is just one example that showed one of our clients was able to target 49% net new households that they were not reaching through their linear television schedules.
So that's pretty powerful stuff, Matt. I really appreciate you digging into that element of it. Hopefully that sparked a lot of light bulbs for the audience here who is really kind of wrestling with understanding, well, where do I spend my money, right? Do I spend my money on traditional, which is what we've been doing for years and years and years, and it certainly works to an extent. And I think you just made the point that there is a huge audience and a very specific audience that we can get in front of. And what's even cooler, which we'll get into later in the discussion, is we can be very, very specific about not only which part of that audience that we can now tap into, being efficient, knowing that there's only about 2% of the car buying public ready to purchase at any point in time, but we can be smart about the amount we're willing to bid on them. So I won't steal any of the thunder before we get into some of the future slides, but I appreciate you making that distinction in terms of the net new. I think that's a very important piece for sure.
So before we move on, the Adtaxi team is going to come up with some great examples of the way that they work with their clients on managing CTV campaigns. So let's take a step back and define CTV so that we're clear about what we're going to be talking about for the rest of the discussion, because in marketing, we sure do love our acronyms, don't you? And there is no shortage of them when we get into the streaming TV space between OTT, FEP, AVOD, CTV. So when we're talking about connected TV, just to take a step back again, we're talking about the largest screen in the house. And we're talking about addressable advertising supported streaming content that comes through your television through some type of internet connection. And obviously that can happen in a variety of ways. And so as the visual shows, some examples of how that happens predominantly through USB sticks. Sometimes that's how consumers are able to get the streaming content they desire. Oftentimes it's through direct downloads of streaming apps onto a smart TV. It could also be represented through consoles. So if you have an Apple TV device or you have a gaming console that you're streaming into. That's the umbrella term when we're talking about in terms of connected TV, because it's going to cover all of that content. That, of course, is not to diminish how consumers are also watching premium video. While a tremendous acceleration of watching that on your primary screen in the household, as we've shown, has greatly accelerated, we also know that consumers are streaming and watching valuable premium video content on their mobile devices and on their tablets, as well as their desktops as well. So the importance of working with a partner like Adtaxi, who has access to our platform, is that we have the ability to target the audiences that are most valuable to you, no matter where they're streaming this content. There's some really cool ways in which you can target and talk about a more omni-channel approach for your campaigns, which the team will get into in a moment. One of the final things I wanted to talk about was a common misperception in terms of thinking about connected TV and buying it programmatically through a platform like the Trade Desk, through partners like Adtaxi. And that is that programmatically sold CTV is the unsold remnant long tail inventory that's available. You're going to get the premium content by going with all the various streaming providers directly, and they leave programmatically everything that's unsold. Nothing could be further from the truth. Really, what we do at the Trade Desk is we strive to buy our inventory as close to the content providers as possible, because the reality with CTV is that it is very fragmented. There are so many different ways that consumers can get the incredible content that's available through these different apps and providers. So we want to ensure that we are not worrying about how a consumer is getting their connected TV content. We want to be able to target them no matter where they are accessing it. And this includes premium content like live sports. We're working with clients right now to set up campaigns for March Madness. This includes first to market opportunities based on our objectivity, like Discovery Plus. Discovery Plus is kind of the latest streaming platform to be released, and we're the first DSP to have access from a private marketplace standpoint with Discovery Plus. Paramount Plus, which is the rebadged CBS All Access, is also coming to our platform this month. But the true reality, and particularly for automotive retailers about connected TV, is while premium content is available, it's really, once you come to a connected TV ecosystem, the focus can become on audiences and outcomes. And you can move your TV strategy away from a content-focused strategy to an audience-focused strategy. In the linear TV world, be it spot television or local cable, we've always been handcuffed for years of only relying on reach and frequency and rating points. And content alignment has always been really a proxy for audiences, right? Well, now that you don't need that proxy because you can target your highly desirable prospects directly in a very data-driven approach and have the confidence that partners like Adtaxi are going to put your message in front of your most important prospects, no matter how or where they're streaming their connected TV content.
I love that. Thank you, Matt. You know, and not to diss the folks who've been really relying on for a long, long time the local broadcast TV strategy. I'm just thinking, by the way, I just said diss. I don't think that's very current. I think the kids these days would say not to throw shade, right? But I think that's a really, really strong point that, you know, there are simply things that cannot be done with traditional that the trade desk is exceptionally well suited for. As a matter of fact, I would go so far as to say they were probably built, or at least connected TV as a platform was built to really take the best advantage of, to your point, you know, how we can be uber specific. And I'm pointing to the biggest screen in my household here, as I sit next to the living room, but really just trying to be smart about, you know, the investments that we're making, right? Because TV has never been cheap, and traditional TV, you know, if you look at it at a gross rating point, is still going to be, you know, holding as much gross, as it were, as they can for obvious reasons, right? They're in business to be profitable here. But, you know, we run into a lot of different reasons as to why dealers really continue to gravitate towards that. Number one is because, again, it's what they're familiar with. It's what they've always known. In a lot of cases, let's be real, we're human, and a lot of us have egos, right? So folks simply like knowing and seeing their own commercials run on TV. Well, we talked about cord cutters earlier in the discussion, and the truth is, if you're not running on a connected TV or digital platform, there's a good chance that you could start seeing your own commercials show up fewer and fewer times. I think Matt really did a good job of addressing that when he spoke of the net new audiences. So I'll leave it at that. But what I want to do is just really kind of get into one of my most favorite elements and features of connected TV, specifically through the trade desk, and that is sequential messaging, right? So we've all seen that probably on our morning news program, that annoying commercial that just keeps playing over and over and over again. And at some point, your frequency level is becoming detrimental to your brand, right? Because not just because you're showing up too often, but really because you're not telling me anything different than the commercial I was exposed to or forced to watch, you know, 5 minutes ago when there was a different commercial break here. Where with sequential messaging, you can do some really, really neat things if you're a brand who has a very long story to tell. So I'll give you an example of a highline manufacturer that we recently worked with, and they asked us, you know, what can we do to try and make sure that folks know that we are incredibly safe. We're known as an incredibly safe brand. That's really been, you know, what our claim to fame has been for decades now. But we also happen to have some incredibly sexy new products that have come out from a styling standpoint that, you know, not very many folks are just aware of these days, just because of how crowded the marketplace is and how small this particular highline brand happens to be. So go a step further, they're also very interested to make sure that folks understood that not only are they still known for their safety and their crash test rating superiority, as well as their new styling, which again, in my opinion, is just absolutely beautiful. But they wanted to make sure that they also, you know, had an opportunity to share, you know, the technology that was built into these, you know, these amazing machines. So that really lent itself, and it was almost the obvious choice to really a sequential messaging connected TV campaign where we can target the right person who we know has shown buying signals, for that particular segment of a vehicle, or maybe they even own a conquest vehicle on that. And instead of, again, going back to that old model of just hammering the same doggone message, and at some point, again, starting to degrade the brand. Instead, what we have the ability to do is we can actually serve messages or videos, 15 or 30-second ad spots, in a very specific sequence at the user level, right? So what that means is that they've caught Daniel Maynard in their web in terms of, audiences who are probably ripe to buy the type of product that I'm going to be selling here. Then they can serve me an ad. And once I've consumed the first ad, maybe it's just an overall branding proposition. The second ad that I'm personally exposed to versus everybody else in that same target pool is going to be served the second message in the sequence, right? So again, maybe I'm drawn in by the by the exterior visual. Some of us are very visual buyers. I happen to be a very technical buyer. I buy my vehicles based on the technology that's built into it, and so that's the third message, right? So we're able to tell essentially call it a 5-minute overall story with 10 30-second spots provided in sequence to the user. And the beauty is not only have you now been able to get essentially 5 minutes of a commercial into the perfect audience that we've carved out for you, but we've also avoided that banner blindness, so to speak, by over communicating the same message to them. So we're building a lot of value, we're educating while at the same time making sure that we're exposing folks to the product or creating awareness, which is certainly still very important in especially a video format. So beyond the sequential messaging, I'll also say that it's incredibly powerful to be able to tap into incredibly specific audiences, right? So if you're a brand, for example, like Toyota or Volvo, which is what we have on the screen here as just an example, you have a number of different initiatives. Even if you're a dealership, right? If you're a dealership, you're not just selling new cars, you're selling certified used, you're selling used, you're selling parts, you're selling service, and maybe other options that you have at your dealership for your customers to really come to a one-stop shop from an automotive perspective. So instead of just saying, okay, well, let's just target all of our car dealership ads or OEM ads or wherever, whatever type of a buyer you might be, we can really, hone in on the audience that's coming up on a 30K service interval, for example, for your particular vehicle. We can hone in on an audience that is coming up on a lease expiration for a competitive vehicle if we want to get in front of those folks. We can even tap into the weather, right? So if we know it's snowing in a specific market that we're serving ads and able to cater towards, we can actually start showing very specific specials and creative that's unique to or that's specific to snow tires. So again, I don't want to poo-poo the other medium. There's certainly a place for that, as Matt expressed. But again, if you're somebody who's really looking to maximize and make incredibly efficient your ad spend, I really would strongly encourage you to take a second guess of where you're spending your TV dollars initially, and then really what we like to say is if you can afford to, or once you kind of get into you need to get into the branding or just the overall awareness phase, then absolutely look at linear and traditional TV. There's still very powerful platforms, which of course complement what we're talking about here today.
Yeah, and obviously, and thanks, Dan, the focus is, of course, connected TV. But one of the things I mentioned at the top, I referred to the Trade Desk as an omni-channel platform. That means that we have connections and opportunity to extend campaigns beyond our biggest and most accelerated platform of connected TV. But that is the ability to extend your campaigns beyond that and begin to retarget consumers after they have seen a fully completed view of your connected TV commercials. You can continue that dialogue with your valuable prospects against really any digital channel. So you can continue to hit them through display efforts, through pre-roll video. We talked about all the different types of premium video that continue to be out there, and you can combine that with your effective connected TV strategies. You can also re-message people through streaming audio, through Pandora, through Spotify, through streaming podcasts where you can really hit home those engaging incentive, limited time incentive offers for consumers after they've seen a connected TV ad. And of course, native is that sponsored content that's kind of disguised as branded content on sites. If that's something that you've tested or been interested in testing, there's an opportunity there to stitch that. There's so many opportunities, not only within connected TV itself, but how you build a cross-platform strategy to continue your dialogue with your valuable prospects. And Dan talked about this before a couple of slides, and I wanted to focus a little bit more time on the opportunities that you have for audience development. So I've been with the Trade Desk just a little over a year, and before that I spent about 7 years on the data side, working on the automotive team at both Datalogics and Oracle Data Cloud. So I've had my head in the data sphere of automotive for the last several years. And so just to reconfirm, as you're setting up that kind of migration, the way that you think about television, from content first to audience first, the different options that are available were first in your incredibly important and valuable first party data. This is the data that you own. This is the data of your customers, historic buyers, recent buyers, service customers. You can very easily onboard that data into the platform and have those campaigns directly with your first party audiences. So you know those owners that are due to come off their lease in the last 90 days. You know those owners that are due for their 30, 40,000 mile service. You can actually start to message them on connected TV now. Lookalike modeling, a very popular tactic in automotive. A big differentiator for us in the Trade Desk that I think is really important on the retail automotive side is that we have a performance-based lookalike engine that we call Audience Predictor, which is based by our artificial intelligence platform, which we call COA. So if you're familiar, you've set up lookalike audiences before through social platforms, or if any of you have worked with standalone DMPs, traditionally, the only control that you have access to is to manage the relevancy of a lookalike model against a seed file. So a popular seed file for modeling comes from first-party data. That's going to be, maybe you want to model off of people that have purchased a vehicle in the last 30 days. Maybe you want to model off of your site converters, those valuable VDP conversions and views that you have. So you select that seed file. When you can only control the relevancy score, it becomes very difficult to think about, how am I going to activate against that audience? How big do I need to make it? Because I'm going to spend this much on this platform and I'm focused on a cost per action goal across my VDP views. So how big do I need to make this audience? And what tends to happen is that people that are building lookalikes err on the side of scale. And the larger the scale of a lookalike audience, the broader and farther away from the seed file it gets. Within our platform, because ours is AI driven, we actually have you pull in your seed file and then put in what your campaign goals are. And the AI engine is going to automatically generate a lookalike engine that updates every single day, that's built against whatever campaign goals you put into the platform. It takes all of the guesswork around, how big do I need to make this audience? On the third-party side, we have a full data management platform with over 100 integrations with the leading third-party data providers, and it covers all of the usual suspects from an in-market auto standpoint, be it Polk, Experian, V12, JD Power and Nielsen's Auto Cloud. We were first to market with Urban Science targeting data, Edmunds, and of course, any of the second-party data relationships you may have negotiated through the popular auto endemics can easily be bought through the platform. So you can really get precise with valuable in-market consumers. And as Dan talked about before, of course, the full ability to retarget not only off of the people that are seeing your CTV ads, but of course, when they're coming to your sites as well.
I love that. Thanks a lot for that, Matt.
Awesome. Well, so one thing I'm going to start kicking into a little bit here is some of the things that we do at Adtaxi using Trade Desk Tech on how we optimize. And one thing I just kind of want to just to level set a little bit, the way that we're placing these ads for connected TV is through what's called dynamic ad insertion. And that's happening through an auction process. So what we're basically doing is, some of you may be familiar with, how an auction works with your search campaigns or something else like that. Basically what we're doing is we're bidding on these impressions. We're bidding on them, each one at a time, each individual impression. Thus the real-time bidding which is how this is done. And there's some very valuable tools of what we can do with these bids to really get the best possible chance for getting people to convert. And so one of those things is called recency bid optimizations. And if you kind of see the chart here on your left, if you're thinking about this from, let's say, like a remarketing perspective, not all impressions are going to be equal, right? So this is why we never really sell on a flat CPM basis. You may find, or we actually do see, the data supports that people are more likely to convert within a very short amount of time from their first visit to the website. So when you're using the sequential messaging and you're using these other bidding audience targeting tools that the other gentleman just talked about, you want to make sure that you put that very valuable message of why should this person who's looking at this model on your website, or who has maybe just filled out a request for information, you want to make sure that you get in front of those people as quickly as possible and win those impressions when they're back online as soon as possible. And we see that when you bid higher for those to win those auctions, we're able to get a better share of conversions. That's not to say that you don't want to keep marketing to people over time. Somebody maybe just in initial phases of doing their research on, getting a new car, maybe their lease is, 3 weeks out from expiring or something like that, and they're still sort of planning and shopping around. Still want to get in front of folks, but we have ways to tailor the bids so that you pay basically like exactly what you want for based on the propensity to convert. So it's a really great tool of being able to put basically exactly the right message at the right time in front of that buyer, but also pay the right price. Something else that's not really mentioned here too is some great predictive clearing pieces that we can do from a clearing price perspective, so that we don't have to pay too much. Nobody likes to pay more than they have to, and that's something that we use this technology to do to help get the most efficiency out of our dealers' CTV budgets. Daniel, go to the next slide, please. One of the other great tools is what we can do from a frequency bidding perspective. So we know from data that the propensity to convert also decreases the more times somebody's seen an ad. So why pay more? Why pay a same amount if you know that maybe the 7th or 8th ad, sure, you can still go ahead and put an ad in front of somebody, but why pay 100 cents on the dollar when you can pay half of that and still bid for that? If you win the impressions, great. But the goal is to really maximize your investment and get the exact right message to the exact right person, exact right time, with the ideal frequency. And that's something that on the next slide is some really interesting research from Trade Desk that talks about, and I think Dan mentioned this earlier, you don't want to always see the same ad all the time on the morning news. People start to get kind of tone deaf to it. And that's the last thing that we all want to be doing with our brand and our investment here. So the study was really interesting. Basically what this shows is that somebody who has been shown an ad once is 5.7% more likely to make a purchase than those who didn't see the ad. Makes sense, right? If you're just going to show an ad, you would expect that person to have a better chance of buying someone than somebody who didn't. If you've shown an ad between 2 and 5 times, you are now 4.4% more likely than somebody who's seen an ad once to make a purchase. So somewhere between 2 and 5 is really the sweet spot. Once you go beyond that, 6 to 10, you are now 4.4% less likely to make a purchase than somebody who saw the ad 2 to 5 times. So you're back down to that 1x, and it starts to decline from there on out. So it's really, I think, key to make sure that we are bidding appropriately and getting frequency. And the nice thing about having this frequency capping feature too is nobody has unlimited ad budgets, right? If you do, please call Dan. But if you don't, you're like the rest of us, you want to make that stretch as far as you can. So knowing how many people are in the market, if instead of serving 15 to 20 ads to one person, why not spread that out and serve it to 2 to 5 people, and you start reaching more and more of that audience that's out there that's likely to convert. And so it's a great tool of some of the ways that we align our strategy of how we get the most out of our clients' budgets to get them the most vehicles sold using CTV. And then I think turn it over to Matt. Yeah, here's another example.
Yeah, and one of the things we talked about in CTV and in the way of balancing CTV and linear, it's really, really fragmented. And as Brian talked about, not only is overfrequency of a bad experience on the consumer side, it's very wasteful on the media spend side. So this visual is meant to kind of support what it might look like in a neighborhood, right? So ideally, as a car dealer, the holy grail would be to pinpoint and identify the household that you want to show your ad to, because most likely they're a qualified in-market consumer. That's likely what you're chasing, wanting to put your ads in front of. So the first thing is that when you're focused on linear, as you see, you absolutely don't have that control, because everyone's going to see that ad, whether they're in the market to buy a car or not. And the other reality of linear television is there is no way to control frequency at a household level. You can plan a linear schedule based on reach and frequency and what rating point targets that you have. But in terms of actually controlling that frequency at a household level, you just can't do. And if you look at quartile viewing analyses, you can see what percent of your buy you're over frequencing consumers on, which you really don't have any control. So you can see the different views of linear that these households are having, where you can't control that frequency. Now, if you were to go into a direct buy relationship with a CTV provider, maybe working with a local cable company that you've always worked with for local cable, and now extending to their OTT product and doing a direct buy that way, you can control the frequency oftentimes within that buy, but not against what else you're buying. So it's kind of siloed, that frequency. And oftentimes when you're doing those direct buys, you don't have the ability to overlay audiences, because oftentimes doing a direct buy, you're going to do a run of schedule where the programmer is actually choosing where your ads run. Some do, some don't. So that leads to over frequencing and wasteful targeting. On the next slide would be an example of consolidating it programmatically through a platform where the exact opposite is true. First of all, that's what audience-driven connected TV is all about, targeting those households that you want to reach based on the signals that they're showing in terms of their in-market propensity, or if they're a service customer, they pop in your first-party file, or you augment your first-party service file with third-party data to get those owners for you franchise dealers, owners of your brands that are going to Jiffy Lube and aftermarket companies. You're going to want to target them and pull them into your dealerships. So you get to pick and choose the exact households that you want to target. And as we talked about all these different omni-channel and retargeting approaches, from connected TV to premium video to things like streaming audio, when you do so through a partner like Adtaxi on our platform, you're able to execute what's called holistic frequency capping. That means across all the different channels you're activating, CTV, premium video, streaming audio is the example I gave. The frequency capping runs across all of those channels and allows you to be much more efficient with your dollars, much better consumer experience. You're not oversaturating them with your messaging as well.
And one other piece on that too, when thinking about the example that was given earlier, a lot of times when buying linear TV, a lot of times people like to buy sort of, like the live programming, so like your morning local news. If you're doing something like that, not only is everybody in the neighborhood in that example who's watching those ads going to see the exact same ad, well, that may not be the best time. People want to buy live because that's when, a lot of times people will time shift their viewing. Other ways that we look at this would be, how do we build a campaign so that we can bid for the exact right moment in time to show these ads? And so if we analyze a website and we say, hey, you know what? The VDP views by Daypart look like this. We know that most of our traffic is coming in, Monday morning. It's coming in Monday afternoon. We get a little bit of a lull sometimes on Thursdays and Fridays. It makes sense for us to bid the right amount so that we can make sure that we are winning the times that matter most. So think about this like, if there's any surfers out there, but you're basically trying to catch the wave at its peak, right? You don't want to be caught in front of it and get crushed. You don't want to be left behind. You really want to try and ride that wave exactly when your audience is online. So now you're targeting the exact households, you're targeting the exact audiences that you want, shoving the right messages that you want in sequence, but you're now also bidding appropriately to make sure that you win the right moments when those people are in market and generally thinking about doing the research, when they've got the time to be able to look at your inventory. So it's really sort of key analysis that we look at for how we bid additionally so that we can save people time and money. And one of the other things I also want to talk about with CTV is that unlike traditional and linear, if you run an ad at 3 a.m. on CTV, somebody's watching it because they're streaming it. So there's actually a viewer in front of that. It's not really the case when you're talking about linear where it can be out there. So we definitely want to make sure that, this has been a crazy year. People work crazy schedules. First responders, people who may have long shifts, maybe up and awake at 3 in the morning, and they want to buy a car. We want to make sure that we put that message in front of them, but we don't want to overpay for something when we know that we can reach that person at basically the exact right price.
So speaking of overpaying, let's have Matt talk to us a little bit about how we measure.
The great thing about, well, one of the many great things that we've been talking about of CTV, and the way I love to position it to clients is it is the impact of television, but with the measurement capabilities of a digital campaign. And we know that when clients are setting up their connected TV strategies and campaigns, there's no such thing as a one size fits all strategy for advertisers as they look for the best way to invest their dollars in connected TV. So we also know that from a reporting standpoint, there can't be a one size fits all reporting framework for connected TV campaigns. So what we strive to do is provide as much optionality to our clients and advertisers as possible so that you can get the reporting that you want at the granularity and the different grains that you want. So we have, over 87 reporting measures, 106 different types of reporting grains, and some examples of those are analyzing the CPMs, the average bids, the geo, the reach, the frequency. These are on-demand reporting frameworks that you can work through partners like Adtaxi to get access to, get them emailed to your inbox and structured exactly the way that you want to see the reporting of your campaign and what metrics are most important to you. But what I'm most excited about is the evolution that we're taking many of our auto clients beyond traditional metrics like you see on this slide here, and really starting to get closer to business outcomes. So one of the first to market things about our platform is that we were first to market in terms of being able to tie offline vehicle sales to automotive campaigns on our platform. So we were the first to market to integrate with Urban Science. So Urban Science, as you may be familiar, works with every OEM in the ecosystem, primarily to help with their franchise development planning. They also work in the e-commerce space from an e-lead management standpoint. But Urban Science receives daily OEM sales data, and that's the data that they feed into our platform. So now you can officially close the loop on your campaigns, not as a way to take credit and say, I sold this car because of my CTV campaign. That takes the whole most important part of the buying experience out of the equation, which is the interaction with your dealerships. But what this allows you to do is understand what are the channels, what are the audience strategies, what are the tactics that are most impactful at reaching buyers. Right now in our platform, we're looking at new vehicle sales conversions, but we have heard overwhelming feedback from our tier 3 clients that it is imperative to be able, if you want to test offline sales measurement, to do so with both new and used vehicles. So over the next 30 days or so, we're going to be making some enhancements to our platform to bring that to market. And we're really, really excited about it.
Great, thanks, Matt. So we're getting close to the end of our time here. So we only have about 2 slides left, so I'll bring it home for us. But I really want to just kind of quickly recap, not the meeting, we're not quite there yet, but really some of the really key points that Matt and Brian kind of spoke to before, right? And that is the theme of integration. The idea of connected TV is certainly not to dissuade folks from pulling all of their budget. Again, depending on what type of an advertiser you are, there still might be, very good use cases for traditional here. Really, what we're trying to impress upon folks here is that the power of this platform comes not in, just its targeting availabilities and its Dayparting availabilities that Mr. Kroll spoke with, and its abilities for us to bid very, very strategically. Brian talked a little bit about recency bidding. I've even had clients that I've worked with, and they've shared by zip code what their close rates were for their particular store, for their particular sales team. And so what we did in that case is we can set different bidding aggressiveness levels based on where they see their ability to actually close business. So the idea here is we want to allow them to grow their empire and grow their reach, but we want to keep their return on their investment linear. So if they're seeing, for example, a 20% close rate in their primary PMA, and maybe outside of a 5-mile radius, they're seeing a 10% close rate. Well, we don't want to not get in front of those folks just because it makes the numbers, kind of go down. We want to get in front of those folks, but we want to be very smart and calculated about how much we're willing to spend to reach that extended audience there. So in which case we would maybe put a 50% bid modification on that secondary ring. So lots of really, really, really smart things we can do. And by the way, if we're making folks kind of heads explodes in terms of how much knowledge and really different features that maybe you weren't aware of before you joined this webinar today, rest assured that you don't have to be an expert in any of this. I'll give credit to the trade desk. They've made it incredibly easy for agencies like Adtaxi to really kind of get up to speed and stay up to speed with all the different features and strategies that are working well, not just in automotive, but really in every major category that's out there. And just as a side note, Adtaxi is very, very fortunate to have tier 1 clients, tier 2 clients, and certainly hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of dealership clients. But half of our business is also designed to cater towards other major e-commerce advertisers, other household names that I won't talk through here just because I want to kind of keep it focused on automotive. But the point here is that we've cut our teeth on e-com. We've cut our teeth on incredibly large public clients who demand incredible efficiencies, right? Who will churn through 50 agencies until they find that agency that has the ability to be hyper targeted and incredibly responsible with the spend that's afforded to them from an advertising standpoint. So what that means for us is, and I'll go on to the next slide, is that we can take all of those pieces that Matt was talking about, where he explained that, listen, if you want to run on Spotify, if you want to run on connected TV, if you want to run on dynamic retargeting display and a handful of other mediums, including programmatic video, for example, right? So those are all the video players on the internet aside from YouTube. We can do all those things. More importantly, we can have those harmonize with each other, right? So if we're seeing some really, really strong buying signals, or more importantly, conversion activities happen where people are actually going to your website after they were exposed to a connected TV ad or set of ads, and taking an action that you define as a win, whether it's a phone call, whether it's a form submission, what have you, we can inform the other campaigns within the trade desk automatically, right? Because it's all within the same ecosystem, so that we know where to kind of get a little more aggressive on our streaming audio campaigns, where to pull back perhaps if we're not seeing as much fruit as we maybe anticipated on a streaming video campaign. So that's a beautiful thing, and that all happens in dang near real time because of the artificial intelligence that Matt mentioned earlier that's built into the trade desk. What's really cool is that Adtaxi has also developed some very impressive ad tech, which I'm not going to get into it just for the sake of time, but we dub it Quantum. And so what Quantum does for us is it sits on top of the trade desk, as well as your social media campaigns and your SEM campaigns, so that we can do the same exact thing, right? We can both with technology, as well as with very well educated data scientists is kind of the best way to dub our strategists who are really pouring through the data and understanding, okay, again, if we're seeing wins coming out of this particular zip code, this particular day part, or this particular, focus group that we're targeting within the trade desk, well, heck, let's just take those learnings and try to really help our social media and our SEM campaigns, advance a little bit more quickly than they would on their own if they were taking in that data through a silo, right? So again, all of these platforms have machine learning or artificial intelligence, or both, built into the back end to help optimize, but never do they talk to each other. So I know a lot of folks watching this series right now potentially have an agency that runs their social media, or perhaps they run their social media in-house, and maybe they have a different group or different team that's running their SEM, and then yet another group that's running their connected TV. My question to you is, how often are you forcing those three, in this scenario, entities to compare notes, to share what's working, to share what's not working? Probably a tougher question for you, and I'm going to smirk a little bit as I ask it. How often has your social media vendor come to you and said, hey, listen, Mrs. Client, we're really not seeing as good a returns as we were last month here. And as a matter of fact, we're seeing some shift and some opportunity in your streaming audio campaign. So we recommend that you pull back your budget with us and move some budget, to another platform where we think you can get better action on that. That simply doesn't happen, right? We're not motivated that way from a business standpoint. The beauty is that the reason, quite frankly, on a personal note, of why I joined this organization, Adtaxi, is that we are set up to do exactly that, right? So we like to say that we are platform agnostic. We are driven by one thing and one thing only, and that is how can we continue to increase the market share for our clients while dropping the cost per acquisition, or in our case, cost per vehicle sold. And so again, if something funky happens in the Facebook world because Apple decides to drop a bomb and kind of move the cheese, so to speak, well, we're still going to continue to monitor it. But the second that we see if it does happen, if we see that we're starting to see declines in the returns for our clients, or the cost per acquisition goes through the roof, but we see still a ton of opportunity left within the trade desk to again get into some programmatic audio, some streaming video, we have the ability, and we're not going to lose anything on our end because the budget is really just being reallocated to what works best. So that's what we do, is really, to take a page out of the Toyota playbook, we try to Kaizen the CPA, right? And that means that we're always looking for the best return, right? And it's no different than how you would entrust your investment monies with your financial advisor. I'm sure you might have a handful of stocks that you're very interested in, but I think it's safe to say that most of us are interested in growing our nest egg so that we can retire or reach whatever goal that is. That's exactly how I would encourage you to look at your digital spend. Is okay, you might have an interest, or there might be very specific mediums that intrigue you, but in the end, the only thing that really should matter is, am I increasing my market share, and am I dropping, or at a minimum keeping flat, my cost per vehicle sold, or my cost per acquisition if you're in the parts or in the service industry there. And unfortunately, again, the traditional TV models are simply not built that way, which is one of the main benefits of working with an agency like Adtaxi, who has the ability to run connected TV, as well as all of the other platforms that again can kind of work with one another there. So I kind of covered the talking points on this piece as I was ranting and jiving on my last. So I'm going to move on to my last slide here, which is, I believe this is my slide, isn't it? Yeah. Okay, here we go. Sorry, I got on a little roll there, so I tend to do that at times. But if you can't tell, I'm passionate about this. I really love, solving the riddles that is this incredibly complex business that is the auto industry and the digital element of it. So I want to talk lastly here about a very brief case study where we had a dealership in kind of a rural area, and the moral of the story here is, again, in the interest of time, I'll kind of condense this piece here, is that they weren't doing connected TV before we spoke with them. So we explained the value proposition. More importantly, we explained what we believe that the upside would be if we were to not just take monies away and defund one element of their advertising, but really complement their existing strategy with connected TV. And what they found was pretty profound, and that is, excuse me. That is that they overall felt a lift. And by the way, this lift wasn't exclusive to just their sales and their leads. What we're finding is that there's really a million rays of light that hit a consumer at any point in time, right? They're influenced by OEM commercials. They're influenced by their peer set reviews, what other folks in their family and their circles think of the vehicle or the brand, and they're influenced by everything in between, from Spotify commercials to the commercials that play in between their ESPN programming when they're streaming through the Roku. And so the idea here is to ensure that we're not leaving any open space for the competitors to to steal that influence away. And so when we do that craftfully, when we do it artfully, we mix the messaging up. We to Brian's earlier point, we really, pay close attention to the frequency across all of the platforms. So we understand kind of at a high level how often we're hitting folks, and how often, more importantly, we need to be in front of folks when we look at the attribution path after the fact, once they've actually submitted a lead here. So that's the beauty of connected TV, is that it works, but it also works to help elevate your other campaigns. So in this example, we actually looked at their SEM campaign, which we didn't make major changes on. Rather, we just lit up a connected complementary connected TV campaign with them, and we actually saw a lift and improvement in their SEM campaign. And a lot of that has to do with just brand recall and cohesive messaging overall. That again kind of speaks to that million rays of lights that hit any consumer at any point in time. And with that, I'll pass it to Matt to wrap up today's presentation.
Yeah, and thanks again to our great partners at Adtaxi for including us in this. I hope everyone found it informative. But just as a summary again, the opportunities, really the ones that we want to hone in on in terms of a takeaway from our discussion this afternoon, is the ability to reach new audiences that are not available on linear TV through connected TV. Being able to unlock the power of sequential messaging through that great example that Dan walked us through earlier in the discussion. Brian gave some great examples of how you can take advantage of frequency capping and bid modifiers to be more efficient with your investment in the connected TV. The ability to not get shy, to get hyper granular and focused with your targeting, with that shift to an audience first strategy, including retargeting. And then of course, being able to connect the dots and measure both online and offline conversion data as we start to get closer to seeing how our investments are truly affecting business outcomes.
Thank you, Matt. And with that, we would love to take some questions if we have any. I think we have about 5 or 6 minutes left in our time here.
Okay, thank you so much, Matt, Brian, and Dan. That was absolutely fantastic. We are now in the QA portion of the webinar, and we did have a few questions to come in while you're presenting. The first question was from Max. He wanted to know, why are CPMs for connected TV averaging so high, almost unjustifiable unless you are a big brand? And why have they not come down if the inventory has expanded so much in the last year? And are there any trends on that?
Yeah, I'd be happy to take that one. So, at the end of the day, CPMs, it's really going to depend on the network or service that you're investing in. The good news is that there are definitely a lot of deals out there, largely a lot on the video on demand side services where CTV CPMs are coming down. But it is true, particularly when you look at network and broadcast partners, where CTV is still limited in proportion to the demand that's available. That's what's going to drive up those CPMs. And so one thing to take into consideration, of course, with CPMs is that connected TV is always going to be more expensive, or at least has been more expensive than linear. And that's largely because much more relevant, much more targeted. But again, the one thing I would call out is to remember that CPM isn't the only thing that you should be looking at, in my opinion. Because we can be more efficient with connected TV, there are really some more insightful metrics that can help show that efficiency beyond CPM. So looking at things like the cost per household, cost per reach, cost per incremental reach, if you're doing both linear and connected TV. And again, what I'm most excited about are starting to look at the actual cost per business outcome. So starting to look at things like cost per buyer reach could really be interesting and really go beyond the CPM to show you the true efficiencies of connected TV.
Okay, very good, Matt. And there's a second part to that question as well. Just a comment at first that there seems to be so many weird names of connected TV inventory that is not always known what it is, where it would show up. Is there a tool to see quality of the different inventory sources? And if not, how would you evaluate the quality of placements? Yeah,
I'm happy to dive into this one as well. The good news here, in working with partners like Adtaxi is you can get better insight in that quality. And that's why we recommend setting up deals with the content owners directly, which we have. And so as you go into the platform and start to go through the inventory and look at the available deals that you have access into, we always recommend, getting as closer to the content owner as possible is going to help you better understand the exact inventory that you're getting. So if you set up those deals directly with pubs, you won't end up seeing things like, fireplace app, what does that mean? Where did my ads really go? So there are tools within the platform where you can absolutely have a better line of sight in confirming that your dollars are being funneled towards the content that you're looking for.
And I would just sort of piggyback on that real fast too, that to reinforce what Matt was mentioning earlier, we don't tend to think about it. I know there's definitely a lot of concern about the inventory. It's all quality inventory. And sometimes you may have some weird names of some of the providers that are the supply side for that inventory, but the inventory is still good. And for us to be able to put an ad in front of an in-market buyer when they're in the decision-making process of possibly which dealership to go with, who they're going to buy from, to put an ad on them when they're watching a rerun movie on like Popcorn Flicks or something like that, that would cost potentially a lot less than premium inventory like March Madness. I'm all about the cost price versus performance, right? If we can get that ad in front of somebody and get the best possible outcome for the dealership, it's about selling cars, not not necessarily the specific show that someone was served or what they were watching.
Yeah, and just to expand on that, we get the question, quite often as soon as folks kind of, become aware of connected TV of, hey, can you put my commercial on this particular program during this particular day part? And we kind of spoke to it, but I just want to, hit it head on. That is simply not an efficient way to buy, right? Again, you may be accustomed to that. Maybe that, that program has served you well in the past. And we're not saying, to abandon the strategy altogether. Rather, what we're encouraging is, buy the consumer, don't buy the content. You're going to save a lot of money that way. I mentioned earlier that only about 2% of folks are actually in market to buy a car at any given point in time. Another one of the examples that that kind of tie into this that we do to help dealerships become more efficient is we can actually upload and include or rather exclude their audiences if we know that they've sold 3,000 cars, 10,000 cars over the last 24, 12 months, and make sure that we're not spending hard-earned dollars, advertising dollars, trying to get somebody to buy a new car from you when maybe they just bought one, right? So instead we will put those folks into a different pool. Maybe we want to kind of get them back for service, we want to get them back for accessories, for parts, what have you there. But that's the most efficient way you can buy connected TV is by really letting the folks who have the ability to kind of hone in on what your particular buyer profile looks like. And I'll go a step further with that. If you're a Toyota dealer, for example, we have pretty good insights into what that buyer looks like down to the model level, right? Even within leasing and buying. But your particular market buyer profile for Toyota Corolla, for example, may be a little bit different in Detroit than in San Francisco. And those are the little nuances that a lot of the first party data that Matt spoke to earlier in the discussion can really help us kind of understand and unlock. And I'll go one step further, and then we'll go on to the last question here. I think we might have time for one last one, and that is that we can actually include hyper detailed buyer segments from a partner called Claritas. And so Claritas really helps us to aggregate, and they have hundreds and hundreds of different buyer profiles that we would take your first party data and find the best match within that profile list. And what's beautiful is that the trade desk is integrated with Claritas to allow us, once we find out what your particular buyer segment aligns with, we can go and light that segment up and optimize and get aggressive with the bidding for folks who fit that particular profile. So again, that's a very, very efficient medium.
Okay, very good. Thank you so much for all three of you chiming in on that question. We do have one more we're going to get in, and that's from Juliet. Her question is, how are we serving users ads at the user level for connected TV? Would it be the household level due to the targeting restrictions?
There's two ways. Matt, I'll let you finish it off, but the connected TV itself would be the household level. So there's household level data, and then there's also individual user level data. If somebody is streaming on, let's say they're watching their connected TV inventory on a personal device, like say a tablet or a laptop, streaming through what's called a full episode player, they're still streaming live TV. I do it all the time in my kitchen. I'll bring my iPad in and I'll sit it there so I can watch sports while I'm cooking or whatever. So that's something that, you know, you could still do. That would be at the individual user level. So Matt, anything else to add on that?
Nope, that's a good summary, and that was a great question from Julia. Good to clarify that point in terms of CTV being, yes, definitely CTV at the household level. That is definitely want to confirm that. But yeah, a great example, Brian, in terms of the nuances between household and user level.
And before our host wraps, I just want to put in a quick plug that there's some great questions that have come through today. I know we're not going to have time to answer all of them. I do encourage you to reach out to us. We are not a high pressure sales organization by any means. In fact, we win a lot of our business by really educating and having these discussions. So if you would like to ask more detailed questions about anything we've discussed today, or if you would like us to put together a strategy and a recommendation for your particular dealership or business, feel free to reach out. Again, at a minimum, I can guarantee you're gonna walk away with useful nuggets that you can implement in your strategies tomorrow, whether you work with us or not.
Okay, very good. Well, thank you so much for attending today's webinar, and a special thank you to Matt from the Trade Desk and Brian and Dan from Adtaxi for just really excellent content on today. To view this webinar on demand and future Digital Dealer webinars, please visit digitaldealer.com/webinars. And we want to thank you again for attending, and have a fantastic day.
Bye all.